An introduction about Sriram. He's a charter member with TiE Chennai. He's also the co-chair of the Retail SIG. He is the founder of the Retail SIG, Special Interest Group. And there are several meetings happening for that, including one tomorrow. So please sign on. Sriram is a retailer by profession and choice over the past 24 years. And you might be wondering, what is by profession and by choice? I'm an engineer by my grandmother's choice. I'm an entrepreneur by my choice. But in Sriram's case, everything is retail. His first job in 1997 was to scoop ice cream at Baskin Robbins at their first outlet in Chennai. Subsequently, of course, he post-school pursued undergraduate in commerce, an MBA in marketing, a PG diploma in international business from IIM Bangalore. He has worked, apart from Baskin Robbins, in RPG Retail, the Future Group, Bangalore International Airport, and I hope a few of you have questions on that. Cafe Coffee Day, Royal Enfield, and now with Specs Makers. You will definitely see the subtle branding with Vichy in the background. So a person who has retail in his heart, up his sleeve. He was recognized among the top 50 retail professionals in India in 2014 by Asia Retail Congress, and a citation of Young Achiever Award honored by Wales University, India. He is in the charter member group. He continues to post, but for the rest of you, go to myretailjourney.com because he's a very avid blogger on the retail climate. His articles continue to be published in ET Retail and other portals. He's a distinguished faculty on retail management at IIT Madras, SRM University, Chennai Business School, and many other such schools in Chennai and Bangalore. That is Sriram S for you. Here to talk about, yes. Here
so we'll go to the topic.
Yes, we will. But kastapattu na edithiriken, so I have to read the whole thing through, Sriram. And for the rest of you folks here, this is how the banter has to be. This is your event. Sriram is your guest. So feel free to start off. And I'm going to kickstart. Sriram, Bangalore International Airport. Let's start with your experience, because that is B2B and B2C, but it is dealing with customers. Your story and experiences, please.
Fantastic. Thanks for hosting the show. And tomorrow, as Praveen rightly said, we have the Consumer SIG. So I will be doing Praveen's role tomorrow, and we have a very, very distinguished guest coming in tomorrow, Mr. Anuj Rustagi, who is the COO, Chief Operating Officer at ITC Foods. So please do join in tomorrow. But before that, thank you once again for asking about Bangalore International Airport. Professionally, I worked with about 7 large companies in the last 24 years. And 2 companies are very close to my heart, and also how people know me as. And even today, when I meet people after many years, they say that we have saved your number as Sriram BIL or Sriram CCD, because these were 2 very important pieces in my professional life, so to say. So I joined Bangalore International Airport in 2006. I was working then for a fashion brand called United Colors of Benetton. I was heading South India. And I got this opportunity, and I was lured into the opportunity in a sense that globally, only about 1 million people work across airports globally. So to be part of that 1 million out of 8 billion was a very interesting piece. Second thing is, it was India's first private airport. Until I joined, March 2006, Mr. Narayan Murthy was the chairman. And April onwards, we had a government appointed person from the state government of Karnataka as the chairman. So which means that there was no political or personal vendetta or lineage or whatever you may call. So it was very neat and clean, and it was growing. The third is, all my life I've grown up sitting at the Elliott's Beach or at the Besanagar Beach, looking maybe 10,000-15,000 feet high when the planes will land into the Meenamakam airport. This was during my college days at Vivekananda. Though I studied evening college 4 to 8, I would be seen more often 6 to 8 at the beach. And that's how my UG was. So aviation was very close to my heart. From sitting and watching planes on the beach to actually working in an airport, I felt was a big opportunity. It was only after I realized, I joined, that I realized that I probably have made the worst mistake in my life. Because after I joined, they said that this airport will come up in 33 months. And they took me to a vast ground spanning about 4,000 acres. And they said, "This is the airport." So this was like Chennai Miga Arigil Arakonathil and Madri. I was either Nesmave, then they took me and they showed me some pit. This is the airport main terminal building on a basement. I came and cried in my house. I locked the bathroom and I cried because my parents were looking for an alliance for me. I said, "Siri, namakku edhu maatala. Arranged marriage because in India we take 5 years to build a flyover. Velachery is an example. So how can we build an airport in 33 months, which is less than 3 years? Impossible. Professional life in poche, personal life in poche, ponnu kedaikadhu, kalyanamo illa, onnume kediyadhu, taatave aaga mudiyadunu I had made up my mind. But that fear was there for the next few weeks. But the airport was co-owned by 3 private partners. We had L&T, Siemens, and the Zurich airport. And I saw firsthand how Siemens and Zurich airport were running this whole project into processes. It was cut into smallest bit, which I'm doing till today. Till today, half an hour back before I joined this meeting, I was actually culling every large aspect of a particular project into the smallest of project, right? So at Spexmakers, I run 240 stores, and we have loss-making stores, we have profit-making stores, we have mid-level stores. So obviously, we go first and chase the most loss-making stores and try and see how we can correct it. So this, actually, I learned it from BIA, where there was so much of importance given to the smallest of the processes. And in record 33 months, we set up the airport, and I was professionally and single-handedly responsible for conceptualizing, designing, leasing, getting the brands into the airport, and after that, marketing, or rather selling the goods and services to customers. Now, I take credit with all humility and with God's grace that I was the first guy in India to do this, because no other airport was doing what we were doing. While Hyderabad was our compatriot, the profile of customers was very different. For example, Bangalore airport had every day about 3 or 4 flights, direct flights to Europe. Whereas Hyderabad had 9 flights every night to Middle East, which means the profile was very, very different. When I say Middle East, these were obviously the labor class and the working class and all that. So the profile of consumers here at the airport was very different. I was shot down by now very famous international and domestic brands like Titan and Apple. I remember to speak to Mr. Shivkumar, who is now with Levers, and he was earlier now with Pepsi and earlier with, of course, Levers and Nokia. So I said, can we create a Nokia lounge at the airport in 2007? Now, the view was, who will appreciate all this in an airport? I said, brands are already doing this. Samsung is already doing something in Korea. I'm talking about 2007. And what happened to Nokia, we all know thereafter. I went to Chroma. I went to many other local domestic chains. I went to Bodycraft, and I went to Green Trends and many other brands to set up a salon inside the airport. It was shut down. They said, who will choose beauty services at the airport? Today, not only airports, even malls have beauty services as a core tenant. Every mall in India today has beauty services. So these were things that we pioneered. So it was a classic case, Praveen, of B2B2C, which means that I was engaging with the businesses, but our ultimate customer was the actual passenger who was going to pay a few hundreds to probably buy a product or service. A very key anecdote which I always share was we had a diamond shop in the domestic departures of the airport. It was a brand called Carbon, which was very famous in the 2000s. So they had their own stores, and they were also present in Shoppers Stop and Lifestyle. So they sold chains and pendants and earrings, mostly for women. And the pricing was between 15,000 to 40,000 rupees. It was a set, it was a piece. And it was not gold laced, it was mostly silver or platinum laced, which means it would be white in color. So obviously my management gave me a free hand. They said, okay, go and try, what's the harm in doing? So Carbon said, okay, if not for business, we'll do it at least for, for publicity. So they took up a shop of about 500 square feet for a monthly rental of 3 lakh rupees. Now, in the first month, second month, third month, fifth month, we were not surprised, but we were pleasantly shocked because in 500 square feet in a month, they were doing about 15 lakhs worth of sales. And in that 15 lakhs, so when you cut it down, it's about 40,000-50,000 rupees a day, which is about 7 to 8 pieces of jewelry. Now, out of this 7 to 8 pieces, and this is the project management which I learned, 80% of the business was coming from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Wow.
And the reason was very simple. It was the guilty father, guilty husband, guilty son, guilty boyfriend, guilty neighbor, pun intended, who was buying a necklace when he was departing from the city. And when they come back, they want to go and gift it to their loved ones. Now, why am I saying him and not a her? Was fundamentally because the gender of the buyer was being noted. So I can say with confidence that it was a him. And secondly, the range that we had kept. Even Carbon felt that, even I felt that. Mr. Mahesh Rao was then the founder CEO of Carbon. And we both felt that this range was not enough to convince a woman to buy a fashion jewelry. Because in necklaces, we would have 6 pieces, which obviously will not appeal to a woman consumer. Which means I was not only doing B2B2C, it was B2B2C to a male consumer for a female product. So, I mean, I can talk hours and hours about the experience in Bangalore airport. Though it was an international airport, I put on my feet and I said, no beef, no pork in the airport. I said, international passengers, Germans, this, that. I said, boss, this is India. Whether I eat or not is not the point. I might eat beef, I might eat pork, it doesn't matter. Do my fellow passengers appreciate the premises selling beef and pork? Even in international departures, till today in Bangalore, they don't serve beef and pork. Right. Because we said, we are India. We are an international airport, but we are in India. So we will respect the local sentiments as much as we believe we should do it. We should cater to the departing international passengers.
Beautiful. That will be a lovely segue into a bunch of questions that I have received. And the first question is from Justin Silas. Justin, this journal is for you if you can direct message your address, because you are the brave heart to put in the first question. And the question here, Sriram, is what is the difference between B2C and D2C marketing? So that question is from Justin Silas.
Sure. Thanks, Justin, for asking. In today's times, the new buzzword is D2C, that is direct to consumer. Now, how different is it from B2C? It is not at all different. It is still B2C is only D2C. The only difference, Justin, here is that in the traditional B2C format, there is a manufacturer or a producer and there is a supply chain. So there is a super stockist, there is a wholesaler, there is a distributor, there is a retailer, and then the consumer. In D2C, it is from the manufacturer all the way directly to the consumer. That's the only difference. So, are D2C brands only online? No, not at all. Not at all. Today, we've had a renowned founder speaker from ID Foods. He has spoken in our Thai conference as well. The ID Foods, the ID Mavu, the batter that we sell, is a very internationally famous brand now. They're also present in Middle East. But trust me, this was not only a household business 20 years back when I used to be a store manager at Food World in Arepuram. This was also prevalently shown in Tamil cinemas. So in the 2002 film Dhool, featuring Vikram, Vivek, actor Vivek, comedian late Vivek, used to run a Didir Mavu factory. Right? He would have 4 or 5 grinders and they would make the Didir Mavu and that is also D2C, by the way. It is direct to consumer. The Mavu is made and it is directly sold to the consumer. Now, the place of sale could be the place where it is manufactured or the so-called internet, because of which the D2C space has become very, very big. So B2C is no different from D2C. And as I've always said in the last 20 years, e-commerce is not an industry. E-commerce is a distribution channel. E-commerce is a supply chain channel. That's all. It is not an industry at all. We have eulogized e-commerce, but e-commerce, instead of physically buying a product, you are buying it online. That's it. So an online D2C is very famous today because investors are pouring money in there. And the so-called analogy that Amazon gave, that instead of putting a shop and selling books, I will ship it directly from my warehouse at a 60% discount. That is the same thing that D2C online brands are doing today. But many brands, if you go to an Anachi shop, even today, he procures rice from, say, Tanjore belt or from Trichy belt, and he sells it in half kilos and 1 kilos and 5 kilos. That is also D2C business. There is nothing different at all. The way we sell today and the way we have packaged it and the way investors are showing interest, I think that is the only point which is different.
Brilliant, Sriram. But yeah, Manasla, it is still that carbon example that you gave that is running in terms of the time, in terms of the men, the reasons, therefore, that in a 3-hour window in a day, bulk of the sales is done. That keeps resonating. But in continuation with the question that Justin asked, we have one from Sunil Godse that's come on direct message to me. The difference in consumer behavior in digital platform versus a retail store. What is the difference in consumer behavior?
Well, I believe that the consumer in the digital platform is a ghost consumer. We don't know whether it is a he or a she physically. Maybe by gender we can, by the name or through some other metrics we can probably identify. But I think in the physical space is where we can really understand the consumer movement, the consumer behavior, so to say. For example, I used to work in Food World about 20 years back at Arepuram. I was the store manager. That store still physically exists, but in the name of Spencer's, right? So in those days, because of the location, we had the former CEO of Ford who used to live in Poise Garden, the expat, he would come over. We had some popular actors and actresses who would come over. We would have leading lawyers and very popular people coming over. And then we would also have the very local uncle, auntie, mama, mommy, the young boy, girl, all those people who would come. But, right from those days where my interest in retail was sown, I have personally seen that when a consumer picks up a bottle of jam or sauce and she tosses it around probably 180 degrees or sometimes even 360 degrees, right? Because it was a Tetra Pak, she would flip it upside down and see, now, when a male comes, he will say, bread he will go pick up a bread, put it in his basket, pay and get out. So, bread or butter or cheese or jam or knife. The male consumer those days, today it has not changed very differently, has always been the same. But a woman consumer will look at filling the kitchen pantry. She will look at filling the gaps. Chakra or kunjana irka vitla, okay, add that sugar and add one and add one and add one. Now, this was how physical retail has been all along. It is no different till date. The point of sale displays, as we call, there are heaps and there are steps and there are beautiful displays which are created. And it is not only in grocery. You take an apparel store, you take a lifestyle or a shopper stop. Very humbly speaking, my shopping time is between 12 to 15 minutes for 10,000-15,000 rupees. I go, I pick up a blue colored dress and I walk out. That's all it takes. But that is how conveniently the men's segment is also created, right? And I'm talking about mostly people born in the 90s or behind. The millennials' shopping preferences always are very different, right? They want to mix and match. They want to spend a lot of time at the physical store. Till date, when I browse movies on Netflix or Amazon, it takes me maybe 2 or 3 swipes to decide which movie to watch. Because we all come from the 60s and 70s generation. So for us, the consideration set is very less. But I know many of my friends who say that they spend more time searching for a movie than watching itself, right? Because there is a problem of choice. That is exactly the challenge in the digital marketing space. When I myself go and browse something on Amazon, 20 minutes later, I forget why I went to browse there. I end up actually shopping something which I never wanted to shop, and probably I never found what I wanted to buy. which is in a way good for the Amazons and the Flipkarts of the world. But I think that is the 180-degree separation probably in physical and digital shopping. Sunil.
Good. But I have an issue with you. அப்படியே ஒரே stretchல you have thrown away all the male shoppers, right? I go and pick up everything there, Sriram, because my wife gives me a list every time I go to the shop. We have one question that's coming from Suren Ramasubbu. I love the audience, folks. This is how you need to be. Just pour the questions. You have Sriram for a limited time. Of course, he's a sweetheart and he'll give you a lot more time. But today, the next question is from Suren Ramasubbu. Does D2C marketing always need to generate positive ROI? If not, how long should a business sustain the investment?
Well, in today's scenario, if you are profitable, you won't get investors. Okay. The more you bleed, the more investors you will get. I don't want to name a brand because this is getting recorded. But 2 weeks back we had a massive IPO debut of a particular brand on e-commerce / fintech / food tech / courier business or whatever you want to call it. But it had one of the highest or the biggest IPO openings in India. But I think it's not about profitability. I think the investor and the success of the business is looked at in terms of the scalability of the opportunity. With say 1,000 customers, if you are able to do X amount of sales, maybe at a small loss. If at 100,000 customers, can you do 100x sales, but maybe at a profit? I think that is the measure in D2C, because D2C is directly getting into the customer's kitchen or into the house or into the drawing room or whatever part of it, which means that here the opportunity to scale is probably significantly higher. To give you a perspective, my previous assignment was with Levista Coffee. It's a packaged coffee brand. And in the pandemic year, that is FY 2021, my team and I managed to grow the business by 79%, 79, right? We almost took the brand from 26,000 touch points or retail stores to about 79,000 touch points. This was during the 12-month period minus 15 days, because April 1 to 14 was a forced lockdown, which means I could operate only 351 days, not 365 days. But the point is, it took us quite a bit of an effort, 170 people, to do all of this. Now, I'm also, advising a startup coming up somewhere in Western India, which is into direct to sales, direct to consumer coffee. The same coffee and tea, but probably the reach of attaining that number could shrink significantly at much, much lower operating expenses. Now, that is the opportunity that online D2C as well as a so-called digital D2C can give. The moment we get D2C into the physical space, it is going to be heavy on operations.
Brilliant. Thank you. This next question is from Varshita. Varshita, I'm going to read your question verbatim for Sriram, but it seems to be a bit generic, so feel free to unmute and come on video and ask Sriram the question. Her question is, what will be the average customer acquisition cost in B2B and D2C sectors? So it's a generic question. Sriram, over to you, Varshita. Feel free to unmute and ask or further qualify for Sriram.
Sure. I think the customer acquisition cost currently, which is being computed, in my humble opinion, is because we are also feeding to a very large customer base. Like, for example, we believe that internet has made the world a smaller village. So we believe that the power of www is the whole of India, all the pin codes put together. Now, when we obviously look at a larger pin code zone, the cost could be very high, or that is the cost of acquisition, to attain a smaller sales. Now, if you say I will focus only in the state of Tamil Nadu or only in the state of Chennai or city of Chennai or one particular market, my sense is the cost of acquisition could come down significantly. That is one. The second thing is the cost of acquisition is usually measured only in terms of the digital spends. But there is also a physical spend or a ATL, BTL spend that also that goes along with that as well. Now, therefore, I don't think that there is a generic answer, Varsha, for saying what could be the spends. I think it is also dependent on the category. Like, for example, if you take pet food, during the pandemic and lockdown period, I know a lot of people who have pets who couldn't feed their loved ones, right? Because pet shops are closed, pet food shops are closed, and they still were in touch with the retailer, and they themselves are not able to get the pet food organized through the online sources. So maybe for pet food, the cost of acquisition could be much lower, right? But when it comes to, say, a generic food product, the cost of acquisition could be very high. I know my friend who heads Kalishwari Industries, gold winner and Cardia, because of giving full page ads in Times of India and the Hindu, urging people to order online from Kalishwari's own website, they saw a multiple times increase in their top line, right? Because oil was a very important thing for your day-to-day cooking. You are under lockdown, so you are under pressure to keep the whole family engaged in terms of consuming knickknacks. Now, a pack of chips can give you only that much, but a half a liter of oil probably can be used 2-3 times to fry, fryams and chips and appalam and whatnot. So I think from a category point of view, also the D2C cost could come down significantly. Tomorrow we have Mr. Anuj Rustagi from Febel Chocolates from ITC Foods. He will probably give a very different spin to cost of acquisition for luxury chocolates. That is Febel, right? As it is, Febel was being made available only in 5-star hotels and some very premium stores. But now, because of a forced lockdown, a lot of the very well-to-do people and those with higher disposable incomes on such luxury products were more than happy to order it online, right? So they were showing the ads only to certain set of people on the Facebook, but their conversions are very, very high. So I think, Varsha, the generic answer for cost of acquisition, at least I am not aware of that. I think it will differ from pin code wise, the way you look at it. It would also be very different when we look at it from a product category. And then when you zone it down within the product category to a particular brand, then I think the cost could be significantly different. I hope I have answered, but if not, please unmute and join us or send us the question in a different form.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sriram. See, the India-England test match was rained out, but you still get low full toss on the leg side kind of questions. And that's the question that you are getting from Rajeshwar B. What are the criteria to measure the performance of management of an airport like BIAL? How do you get customer input to measure your performance?
Fantastic. So globally, every airport has got two key revenue models. We call it as aero revenue and non-aero revenue. So aero is obviously aeronautical revenue. Aeronautical is then split into two parts. One is the landing and parking fee, which is for every touchdown and takeoff, there is a fee that is paid, and for parking. So the parking is given for a few minutes for free, and then thereafter for overnight parking and so on, there is a cost that gets added on to that. When it comes to the user fee, every time a passenger flies through a particular airport, the airline has to pay a certain amount of that money to the airport as a passenger fee. So that's the aeronautical revenue. Globally, the aero non-aero split, the aero part of the revenue is about between 70 to 75%, and 25% comes from non-aeronautical. In India, before the private airports came, it was 97% aeronautical, 3% non-aeronautical. Today, it has grown up to about 12%. 12% non-aeronautical and about 88% aeronautical. We believe that even with the pandemic, by 2025, at least the top 20 private airports in India will achieve a 20-80 split, which means 20% of the revenues will come from non-aero revenues and 80% will come from aeronautical revenues. Now, this is how you measure the value. To give you a perspective, all the private airports in India together have a annual turnover, pre-COVID obviously, of about 6,000-7,000 crores per annum. That is $1 billion. All the airports put together, that is Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, together is about 2,000 crores in revenue. That is the airport retail, shopping, dining that happens at the airport without the foreign exchange that I'm talking about, right? And then you have all the airports. So all put together is still less than 5,000 crores. To give a perspective, the Incheon airport in Korea, in South Korea, does 1 billion per annum. The second highest is Singapore. Actually, pre-COVID, Incheon had gone up to $1.3 billion. Singapore was $1.1 billion. And Dubai was $1 billion in 1 year in one airport. That's the kind of revenues they do. So all airports put together in India, we are not yet at $1 billion. So that's the opportunity that we are staring at. Then comes the fact that the rentals at the airports are significantly higher. Why does your idli cost, a plate of idli of 2 or 3 pieces plus a vada costs about 150 rupees? Why? Because they cannot use LPG. They have to use electricity. Now, electricity, obviously, the cost of electricity at an airport, which is not the consumer cost, or it is not what we call as a low tension and high tension, right? So obviously, it's an industrial revenue, industrial electricity which is charged, which means the airport food operator probably is being charged 3 to 4 times the cost of what we do at home. And therefore, the electricity cost is high. The equipment cost is very, very high. The place is very, very premium. It is probably the most safest place on earth, as I would say, except for the Kandahar airport, because we don't know when the guys are going to take over that. Matter of days, very unfortunate, but they've already captured the smaller airports in Afghanistan. But coming back to India, it's a very, very secure zone. Literally nothing can go wrong inside an airport, which means that the passenger, the consumer of the idli and the maker of the idli is paying for the security cost. And lastly comes the technology or the expertise and the knowledge, the skill set that is required. So when you add up all these things, your idli dosa becomes 150, 200 rupees. In many cases, many food cannot even be prepared inside the airport. So it is made outside the airport premises and transferred here. It has to be fresh, which means it is made in smaller batches and smaller quantities. The frequency of transportation is very, very high, right? Otherwise, the food will get stale. So how do you measure the ROI, or how do you measure is obviously on the basis of the profitability of the stores. But having said that, let me give you a very interesting anecdote. The next time you go to Bangalore International Airport, you will find a Subway outlet just outside when you are inside. It's a perspective, 6 or 9, how you and I see the same thing. That Subway outlet was created on the day when we opened the airport in 2008. That Subway is the highest sales of any Subway in the country.
Wow.
They sell about 2,000 subs a day, right? And obviously, he's probably the richest airport retail tenant or franchisee that we have had. And Griffith David is his name. He is the one who runs the Habanero chain of restaurants and bars. So that was his second, third business because he made so much of good money at the airport. So, obviously the measure is definitely on the profitability of the business, but it's a very, very complicated and very tough business to be in. In the recent years, I've also been, when I was consulting, I had a consulting firm called Miles to Go Consulting, Praveen, you would know. I was also a formal consultant for the Chennai airport to AAI as well. And I've advised them on tenders and so on and so forth. So it's a very difficult and complicated business to be in. Now, remove the word airport and add metro rail. Conceptually, it's the same. Conceptually, it's the same. Nothing else is different because as a consumer, we are selling a product to somebody in a premise where they are not even in a mood for consumption. He or she or the third gender is probably in there for commuting, not for consuming. So you are converting a commuter into a consumer. Now that is the biggest challenge.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Now, Sriram, whole bunch of questions coming in from healthcare to others leading up to eyewear. We will cover it. But here's one that's coming from Jawahar Avici. When we do direct to consumer, will not the cost of package shipment to faraway places from our manufacturing unit cut down our profit margin?
Absolutely. That is why I said the world is not a small digital village. No, get out of that mindset. Doesn't work. It might work for certain products. It might work for the book, the hundreds of books which are behind Praveen's background, because it's just 200 to 220 grams. So it doesn't matter when you send it by courier. But when you're sending a pack of murku, or if you're sending masala powder, the farther you have to travel, the more is the cost. So it's a misnomer that D2C business can be scaled overnight across India or across the world. Of course, there is a huge challenge in terms of transportation and logistics. And trust me, transportation to metro, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is completely different. If I have to send a courier from Chennai to Madurai, it's 1 day. But Madurai to Tirumangalam, which is only 40 kilometers from Chennai to Tirumangalam, which is only 40 kilometers from Madurai, is T+1, which means it will take 1 more day. The courier goes from here to Madurai tomorrow, probably from Madurai to Tirumangalam only the next day. The same thing from Madurai to Sivagasi, Madurai to Virudunagar, Madurai to Kovilpatti, and so on. So you could be between 30 to 100 kilometers, but it is still T+1 or T+2 in some cases, right? So obviously in D2C, the cost of transportation and the cost of distribution is significantly higher. It's not as simple as what we read on popular websites, the story.com and things like that. It is not as easy. It's a very, very tough journey, frankly.
I think that is something that all of us as entrepreneurs forget sometimes, Sriram. Looking at the glamour in the media and the blitz, and we somehow assume it's easy for us to jump onto the bandwagon. Here is one question from DK Saujanya. How does the D2C help in the healthcare sector, particularly in this pandemic?
Fantastic question. I'm taking healthcare as everything from medicines to an oximeter and beyond. So I think in the current scenario, a D2C, obviously it could be branded or multi-branded. When I say multi-branded, it could be a pharmacy, or it could be a health center, or it could be even a doctor's clinic. It could be an Ayurveda person who is probably sending Thylums and lotions and oils and so on. I think during the pandemic, D2C is probably the biggest savior for consumers. It helps them to avoid visiting physical stores purely from a threat of getting accidentally contaminated. Last week, I was in Bangalore and my CEO was on a call. He said, "How is the traffic in Bangalore?" I said, "I see the third wave in 3 weeks." Was my response to his question on how is Bangalore traffic. On one side, my sales team says that all the migrants have moved back to Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, and Bihar and UP, so no customers, sir, sales varla. On the other side, there is traffic at every traffic junction, right? And I was not sure, I'm still not sure if all of them are traveling only on work, which means that people are still braving and moving out for various chores. But definitely from a healthcare point of view, depending on what product or service that you are particularly are on, I think it's a fantastic time to be on the D2C model during the pandemic time. And when I say pandemic, in my humble opinion, there are 2 eras currently. So there is a pre-COVID era and there is a COVID era. There is nothing called post-COVID era because we don't know when that is. So we are present continuous. There is no future at all. So now they are saying, there is one vaccine which can help avoid the second dose itself. There is a recent study by ICMR which says that you can mix and match 2 vaccines. So I think this is one the number. Balasundar sir, COVID, I think it will keep going. We need to live with it. That's it. I think many retail chains, many brands, many companies have accepted that this is here to stay. This is not going to go away, G boomba, suddenly it's gone. No, not at all. We've taken 15, 20, 25 years to eradicate polio in this country. COVID is a global pandemic. The coronavirus is a global pandemic. And we're not even addressing the children yet because the number of children affected is the least. God forbid, So obviously there are 2 eras. There is a pre-COVID era, there is a COVID era. So brace up for the COVID era and brace up for today and tomorrow, assuming that this is how things are going to be. Nothing is going to change. In that case, how is it that I'm going to serve the consumer, either B2C or D2C or B2C, whichever way, offline, online, digital, whichever way, the only way to look at it is in the COVID era. So there is no post-pandemic period because we don't know when that is.
Right. Now, this is a question from my side, Sriram. I've known you across several avatars, including you being a retailer as well. Now, this question is for all of us here. Could you narrate some example or experience of a D2C failure? And there's so much that we can learn from that as well.
D2C, is it? Direct to consumer.
Direct to consumer or B2C failure?
No, D2C, I would believe that, for the 10, 15 success stories that we have been reading in the newspapers, there are hundreds of failures. Hundreds, right? It's just that nobody writes about them. Nykaa, which is getting into an IPO now in the next coming weeks, actually started as a D2C brand. They started with their own private label, and then they moved into some popular brands, and they were only digital for a very long time to come. Then they went into physical stores, they went into malls, they went into high streets, and then again they retracted to online because of the pandemic, and now they're hitting an IPO. Now, for every Nykaa, there are 20, 30, 50, 100 other people who have tried and unfortunately failed. Now, obviously, we don't know their names because nobody talks about them, right? But in terms of failure, I wouldn't call them as failures. I would say, for whatever reason, they didn't take off. Like there was this famous coffee brand called Tanjara, right? They had two identical foreigner girls who do Bharatanatyam. And that was the popular ad for Tanjara. You could Google it, Tanjara. Very short-lived brand, very high decibel advertising. And obviously they were focusing on the South market, within South Tamil Nadu, the Chennai market. But unfortunately, they didn't take off in a very big way. If you can't sell coffee in Tamil Nadu and Chennai, you can't sell it anywhere else. So, as simple as that. You can't go wrong with, unless your coffee quality is so bad, right? And for the record, every day, pre-pandemic, 66 lakh people were traveling by trains across India. 66 lakh people. 66 lakh people pre-COVID. I have personally done a special project for ITC for the airport business, for the railways business. Now, 66 lakh people traveling every day in a train. Take the number of tea and coffee which is sold. So I think this is one example. Amrutanjan, right? We all know Amrutanjan as the pain bomb, but Amrutanjan has come up with so many products which unfortunately couldn't take off to the market. Obviously, these are all B2C brands. D2C failures, I think, as I said, hundreds of brands have come and gone off. Many have not even taken off. I don't know if he is here. I know a very good acquaintance which I have known for the last few years called Snack Experts. I think he was also a TiE Chennai associate member many years back, Arul Murugan, and fantastic product. It was healthy snack. It's 6:15. I want to eat something. I have junk, right? Either I'm eating Maida biscuits or some samosa or some other chips or something like that. And these guys have come up with a brilliant snack, which is a D2C snack. And they actually took the B2B to D2C snack, Praveen. So he had tied up with IT companies where they give the snack as a gratis to their employees, right? Like if any of you here who know or who have worked with TVS Motors, till today, 5:30 in the evening, they will give a small packet of mixture. Right? It happens across many other factories across Tamil Nadu, across India, because there is a hunger pang that which happens. So it is partially to motivate the people to work more, and it is obviously a HR welfare scheme as well. So these guys at Snack Experts had cracked this market very well. They were giving the snack already to a few IT companies, which was a B2B to D2C. Right? That's how they were building the portfolio. And if the consumer liked it, they could go back and order it online, or they could call and they would deliver and things like that. I honestly do not know currently what is the status, but I think that is one brand which I felt had a huge scope. And during the pandemic, now that about 30% of the IT, ITES, and the so-called white-collar force working from home, there is a very, very large opportunity. Similarly, I have myself evaluated pitches, being a Thai Charter member, of D2C juices, of probiotic products, drinks, health food. So I think there have been more failures than successes, obviously. It's just that we don't know most of them.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Sriram. Here's a question from Bhavesh Trivedi. Do you see a gap in B2B marketing execution where B2B marketing managers can get a platform to get services when and where they want, as hiring an ad agency, that very company that can afford? Do you see there is a vacuum here?
Sure. I mean, I take B2B marketing as, say, I'm the vice president sales and marketing at SpexMakers. And if somebody is pitching something to SpexMakers, that is B2B marketing, right? Well, I have seen a lot of young managers trying to reach me at 10:30 morning on a Monday morning. Now, many cases I try to make them understand that most companies will be doing their internal evaluations on a Monday. Many of them at least half a day, or many of them full day. And when somebody is handling both sales and marketing, the importance given to marketing will always be much, much later or lower than they give for sales. Which means if you send a B2B mail on a Monday morning, 99% you will not get a response. And I tell this openly to many people, boss, I have to earn money to spend the money. So can you please allow me on Monday and Tuesday to earn money, or to evaluate how do I earn money? So the best time in my learning that I have seen as a consultant, I have reached out to so many people, probably not on a Monday, probably not until the second half of Tuesday. Second half of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is when there is a focus on marketing. I think that is where B2B could actually be a cracker. That is number one. Number two, the question is also very genuine, because you're talking about ad agency and you're talking about, I mean, I don't know which product category that he was referring to. So, of course, there are agents and there are distributors and there are middlemen who try to get you a deal. It depends on from product to product. When I was doing my MBA, 22 years back, I actually did an interim project. We used to have all that nonsense those days. So there was a summer project and there was an interim project. Interim project, the more interim projects you do, the more chances of PPE. Oh, you have done 3 projects. Okay, we'll take you. So I remember 1999, I did an interim project there was an ad agency called HTA, Hindustan Thompson Associates. And for them, I did an interim project on a concept which was very new to India at that time. It was called online shopping, right? And then I did another interim project for a company called, it was an AC brand, where I had to go and analyze how a split AC will replace a window AC in offices, not in houses, right? So obviously the pitches that I had to do was always at a later stage, not on a Monday or a Tuesday. So I think B2B pitching, if that is the question, has to be very different than B2C consumer. For example, at Levista, before I went, most of the monies on advertising were being pumped between 6 and 9 in the night, because that's where prime time customer is there. That's where the soaps and serials and so on and so forth are going. After I went, it was a strategic decision which my management supported. And till today morning, they're continuing that. I moved coffee advertising from 6:30 to 9:30 in the night to 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning. The simple concept is you can advertise a condom at 8 o'clock in the night, not at 6 in the morning. Similarly, you must advertise a coffee when you are drinking coffee or tea in the morning and not when you're going to have dinner. Because the connect of that product category is probably significantly higher. So can you therefore advertise a toothpaste or a toothbrush at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Tricky question. But for a very focused product category like a condom or a coffee, there are certain time points where only you show that. Till today, we don't see a score or we don't see a Kama Sutra in the 6 to 9 slot in any TV channel in the morning. Obviously, the brand manager is thinking about that, right? So that doesn't mean that people do not use a condom at that point in time. No, that's not the point. Many, many millions of people worldwide might or might not be. But a coffee at 8 o'clock in the night in India is generally a no-go, right? So I think from a category point of view, it is important to communicate in the right media, in the right medium, so to say. It could be a television, radio, and so on and so forth. I hope that answers this question, but otherwise I can take a follow-up on that.
No, absolutely. Here's one from Srinivasan for you with specific reference to the eyewear industry. Is there any difference in the way business is handled by traditional retailers who stepped into online versus online portals who opened retail stores?
Fantastic question. I'm yet to see traditional retailers going online in a very big way because spectacles or the optical industry is a very complicated one. Many people do not understand the challenges and difficulty in running an online portal for the optical industry. Now, there are global giants in India as well, who have sort of cracked this market, but the return cases, the number of returns or replacements, which is obviously not told outside, is also significantly higher. So at Specsmakers, we are 90-95% skewed towards offline, right? Because there is a fit and finish for the frame. And then for the lens, there is a point of refraction, as we call, where the exact point has to be marked by a trained and qualified optometrist at a physical store using an optometry machine. And thereafter, the convexity or the concavity of the lens has to be manufactured or designed and fitted in the right manner. And then when it is handed over to the customer, it has to be worn and checked. So going offline to online in this business is extremely challenging. What can work, obviously, is probably on sunglasses, where only the fit or only the look is important, not the viewability or the readability part of it. But that doesn't mean that online is not a right channel or a channel of distribution, but extremely difficult. That's number one. Number two, the traditional retailers, I think, have realized that the biggest challenge they will face in today's scenario, especially with more and more millennials and the 90s and 80s customers, 90s, 80s born customers coming and asking, is they want a range. So a traditional optician is not able to provide that range. Show me, in Aviator, show me 15 choices, Abhina, they don't have. Right? In a cat eye, show me 25 options, they don't have. They have limited number of choices. Today, the frames, the frames are so fashionable. There are so many materials which are now made using for the frames. I think traditional retailers have realized there are 45,000 estimated opticians across India, right? All the branded retail chains put together, including Specsmakers, is only 2,000 in India. Lenskart has got about 800 plus retail stores. The second most is Titan Eye Plus, which is about 350. Specsmakers is third in India with about 240 stores. Then comes Reliance Vision Express with about 150 odd stores. These are the four large chains of stores that are there in the country. Then we have GKB Opticals, we have Himalaya, we have Lawrence and Mayo, local chains like Turakia, Kapleshwar, who are between 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 outlets, right? All the organized players put together is less than 2,000. The total number of stores is about estimated 40,000, which means that headroom that we have is 90%. We can grow left, right, center, top, bottom, wherever we want, we can grow. That is the opportunity that throws us. So the challenge that I think the traditional retailers are having today is obviously in terms of presenting the range for a price the customer is willing to pay. So I think this is the biggest challenge in the current optical/optician retail industry.
Beautiful. Mohan, I've not forgotten you. I wanted to save your question up to the last, but you've reached out to me a couple of times, and here goes your question. Question from Mohan. Food products. What is the perception of Indian consumers on the same food products like sauce, jam, etc., that is sold at ambient, chilled, frozen? different temperatures. How would they evaluate on what parameters?
Well, in food world, I remember we used to sell something new at that time called private label. என்னன்னா food world sticker ஒட்டிருக்கும் sauce மேல. And the former marketing head of food world, Ms. Mala Morris, she would come and explain to us that she would even show that the product could in many cases be even manufactured in the same factory as a Kisan, right? It's just that it's got a different wrapper around, so to say. So Levista's parent company, SLN Coffee, also makes coffee for some of the most famous global brands, including in India, which means that it's the same factory, same worker, it's the same coffee bean, probably, and definitely the same machine, which is still making the coffee powder. It's marketed in brand A at a premium and marketed at brand B at a lower premium. Now, the customer perception today is more about, not about the ambient temperature alone. In today's scenario, I think the customer is getting into details, right? 15, 20 years back, I have probably not seen many customers looking at the manufacturing date or expiry date. Today, consumers are doing that. We had a very unfortunate event last week in Chennai where a child consumed a expired cold drink and passed out immediately within a few hours. Now, the blame is all on the manufacturer because the product was expired. Now, where is the responsibility and accountability of the retailer? That's the first question. But having said that, the manufacturer also, as an owner of the brand, has a very large responsibility to pull back the unsold products or help the retailer to clear them. The retailer will raise his hands and say, boss, pandemic, or he could claim ignorance and say, somebody sold it, it was packed and kept beside, it was not to be sold, but somebody gave it. Now, these are all excuses that we can give, but we lost a child. Right? So the accountability today for retailers and brands is far higher than what it used to be many years back. So whether it is frozen, chilled, dried, I think these are new. As I say, how e-commerce is a channel of distribution. This is a different way of packaging. The product is the same, right? How appealing is it to the customer? A lot, because today we sell probably about 200 times more microwave ovens we sold even 5 years back. 5 years back, 200 times more we are selling, right? In the last 1 year, we have sold 10 times more dishwashers than what we have sold in the last 10 years, right? Because the high-rise consumer realized that, oh, my maid was doing all this work. I didn't realize how many vessels were going to her for a paltry 2,000, 3,000 salary, which we would negotiate so hard. When I had to stand, trust me, Praveen, last year, April, May, June, July, I have finished watching a full movie on Amazon Prime washing vessels. I swear. Then I realized I could actually finish it in half the time. The film was so intriguing that I was actually taking more time. So I moved from audio visual to only audio. So I started moving to podcasts and upanyasams and so on and so forth. So my productivity also increased. But having said that, I think it's not about frozen or any other form. It's just a form factor. I think it's the packaging. Today, the consumer is willing to buy that particular product. Take popcorn for an example. Folks whom I know who run retail stores say that the microwavable Act 2 popcorn, that particular SKU alone has grown some 10-15 times for each of them. Next time, all the 40 people who are in this forum, next time you go to a physical retail store, check with that shop if they have Act 2 microwave popcorn. In all probability, they will not have. You know why? Because for a working mother or a working father or a grandparent, it's the easiest 4 o'clock snack to give to a kid. You buy it, you bring it, keep it in a microwave, you tell the child, turn it on for 1 minute. And then take it, mix it, put it back, 1 minute. You have a pack of popcorn, right? So I think what you're referring to here, Mohan, is probably a form of packaging which appeals to a certain consumer. Now, this is during the pandemic period. Will this change post-pandemic? We don't know. Because certain habits, I think, will get formed, right? 15 years back, we had to push people to consume or at least try consuming a pack of cornflakes. Today, it's a staple, right? 10 years back, we had to advise kids. 5 years back, 2 years back, we had to advise kids not to eat so much of noodles. Today, parents are pushing noodles onto the children. What is the breakfast today? Today, okay, let's have noodles, right? So I think times change. So the packaging will probably change from time to time. One last example. Big Bazaar was always famous for their big packs. So a Pepsi or a Fanta or a rice or any product in a Big Bazaar was always in big packs, including the chips. You will only get a 40-50 rupee pack. Because of the pandemic, people had to stop going to a Big Bazaar for two reasons. One, Big Bazaar was closed. I'm saying when I say Big Bazaar, it's the large format store as an example. It could be a More Hyper, it could be a Reliance Hyper or whatever it is. Now, when people were not going to these stores, they were ending up going to a nearby Kirana store or maybe ordering on the phone or on a WhatsApp. Now, that guy didn't have a 2-liter Pepsi. He was only having a small pack of Pepsi because his shop is also very small. Today, the consumption pattern has come down from big packaging to small packaging. And the customer feels that in small packaging, I'm consuming less, especially of the junk food. Two, I'm spending much lesser than what I was spending for a bigger pack. Now, these are very interesting changing consumer habits, which are momentary for the time being. Will this evolve or change after pandemic? We don't know.
தயவு செஞ்சு ஞாபகப்படுத்தாதீங்க ஸ்ரீராம். அப்புறம் தேய்ச்சி I had to ask my wife for portfolio reallocation. துணியை துவைக்கிறது, காயப்படுறது, மடிச்சு வைக்கிறது, அந்த மாதிரி easier parts. Now here's a question from Jawahar Avici. How do you differentiate your specs maker products from your competitors in the market?
Well, interesting question, Mohan. Sorry, Jawahar. I think the founders, Pratik and his wife, and also many people in the company, this company is 17 years old now. And I think all of them have believed that the competition largely is not the branded players, but the unbranded local mom and pop stores. I think that's the biggest competition. If you ask me, who is the biggest competitor for Reliance Fresh? I wouldn't say Amazon or I wouldn't say Future Group. I would say it is the nearby unbranded Kirana store. That's the biggest competition. And I've argued this for the last 20 odd years. As Praveen rightly said, if you could visit myretailjourney.com, which is my blog site, I've probably written hundreds of articles and many of them I have spoken on David versus Goliath in retail. The Goliath here is actually not Reliance or Amazon. The Goliath here is the collective power of the Kirana stores. I think it is no different when we compare it in the spectacle industry or the apparel industry or the footwear industry or any industry for that matter. So I think for specs makers, the relatable nearest competitor is the nearby mom and pop optical store. And when I took over here also, I think the thinking pattern has not changed at all. We want to be far superior than them in the product offering, in the customer experience, in the transparency of the transaction, and most importantly, the way we treat our employees. I think these are the 4 things which will make a cut. Because the employee also most probably comes from that pool of talent only. He or she, as an optometrist or a salesperson, has worked in a mom and pop optical store and is probably now coming for an employment here. It is my duty to treat them much better than what they were being treated and at par with industry standards, and definitely aspire to treat them in a very, very nice way than probably we already are doing. So I think competition is a very large word. As I said, we have 240 stores, there are 45,000 optical stores in India. The headroom for me is 99%. I hope my board members are not watching this. My CEO is here, he's not watching for sure. But I think the headroom that we have to grow is 99%. So where is the question of competition?
Brilliant. There's one from Vagisa. With your permission, I'm going to change it slightly. For entrepreneurs, what would be the common tips for pitching a B2C product?
Pitching to an investor? Is that?
I think I would rephrase him as to pitching it straight to the consumer.
Okay. Great. Before I took over at Specsmakers, I was working very closely with a classmate of mine. He still is aspiring and he wants to launch a range of D2C masala, spices, and ready to cook food items. So we spoke at A to B, we spoke over the phone, we spoke in person, we spoke in the morning, we spoke in the afternoon, in the night, and we were not able to crack that one particular thing. Why is my product different than what is in the market? I would say the project is kept in abeyance because we have not figured out an answer. Am I significantly lower or differently priced in terms of pricing? Probably no. Am I offering something which doesn't exist in the market at all? Definitely no. Am I offering something which is probably unique in its own way? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. In terms of the brand, obviously nobody knows us because it's a startup brand. So why should a customer even try us? So we said, I have 20 years of corporate experience. He's got 20 years of corporate experience. Family, friends, all put together. Or 1000 பேர் இருப்பாங்களா? So the first 1000 transactions guaranteed. But the second time, if Praveen has to buy my masala or spices, why will he buy? Unless I told him that unless we have an answer for this, we should not even go in that direction. We said, let us bring probably the ready-to-eat snack which is sold in Indigo flight for 100 rupees. So there is a upma on which you put hot water, you cover it. Am I the first one to do? No, it is already available on Amazon. So in that, can we bring more native food items? How can we make it different? We tried, like a Rubik's Cube, we tried a lot of ifs and buts. We were not able to crack. So I said, look, if you give me something very unique, I can crack that into the market. But if I go and tell a consumer that instead of Achi masala or Shakti masala, buy Shriram masala, the customer will laugh at me. My friends will say, okay, seri tola vaangi tola edo therinjavana oru packet 50 ரூபாய் ஒழிஞ்சு போகுதுன்னு ஒரு வாட்டி வாங்குவாங்க. But the next time, so I think the pitch for a D2C product, it could be any product. It could be from hair cream to foot polish, footwear polish. Why are you significantly different? Like, for example, I felt that a cherry blossom and the kiwi shoe polish give a very terrible odor. Can somebody make a footwear polish, which smells like the gel pens which were launched 20 years back? I remember my classmates saying that in the gel vasana irundaduna nariya mark varum. இது என்னடா புதுசா கதையா இருக்கு, வெள்ளையா இருக்கிறவங்க பொய் சொல்ல மாட்டாங்கிற மாதிரி புதுசா they would find reasons. இல்ல திருத்துறவங்களுக்கு இந்த ஸ்மெல் ரொம்ப பிடிக்கும், ரொம்ப ஃப்ரேக்ரண்டா இருக்குன்னு நிறைய மார்க் போடுவாங்க. That's perception, right? So similarly, that shoe polish stinks, by putting some flavor. Can it smell lavender? Can it smell jasmine? Can it smell something? I don't know if anyone has even thought about it, right? A shaving cream, for example, a shaving gel, for example, 98% of the market share is one brand called Gillette. 2% is with about 10 brands. Now, why is Gillette so superior? Because the technology is cutting edge. Nobody is able to crack that. But that is when it comes to blades. When it comes to a gel or when it comes to a foam, I'm sure there is a lot of opportunity in there. Look at the agarbatti market. I mean, this is another popular anecdote which I keep sharing from retailers whom I speak to. Definitely, the agarbatti, lamp wick, karpuram, camphor, these product sales has significantly increased during the lockdown. People who would light a lamp once a day at home are now doing it twice a day. One agarbatti has now become 2 agarbattis, morning and evening. And many people also have this feeling that, a nice fragrant room will also give them a better mood to work, which means the consumption has grown significantly higher. So I think every category in D2C, and all these are D2C brands. If
right.
Instead of giving one stick at 1 rupee, can I give it at 1 rupee 10 paise? But instead of burning off in 12 minutes, I will guarantee it will burn for 15 minutes. I think that is that one different thing.
Beautiful, beautiful. One question here from Saujanya. Saujanya, you may have to jump in and clarify it for Sriram. For academic institutions to try, what would you suggest, B2C or D2C?
Academic institutions to try their courses, I understand here, which could be a certificate course, it could be upskilling oneself. Well, I think you should speak to Mr. Baiju. He might buy out your company or your college or your institution. He's got a checkbook which has got unlimited leaves. But jokes apart, I think definitely a D2C works far better today. We have some Ivy League courses which are being offered in India online, mostly online. The who's who of the Ivy League are now offering online courses, but they've all been there in India for the last 10 years. It's not new, right? I know people who have passed out of Stanford sitting in Bombay or Bangalore, only doing online courses 8 years, 10 years back, right? So I think that B2C market for online education was always there. I think in today's scenario, I think it is D2C. So when we see on LinkedIn, when we see on Facebook, we see flooded with some of these D2C courses. So I think education is very personal today, in my opinion. About 9 years back, my classmate had her pregnancy, and the elder one was moved to their native town, and she said the kid will have homeschooling. I said, what is homeschooling? So she said, no, she will sit at home and she will study, but she will write the exam and she will pass. I said, it's not in India. I said, who said? Of course it's there in India. My own kids are under homeschooling for the last 1.5 years. Okay? Online education. Online school is homeschooling, right? Yeah, it's homeschooling. Yesterday, my daughter's teacher asked the entire class to wear a uniform. Okay? My daughter wore and came, and I was in golden tears. I said, when are you going to fly out of this nest? I'm waiting for the day to come. But does it look like the next 3 months at least? So I think today homeschooling has become a reality. And homeschooling today has become a reality not for higher education or upskilling or 9th and 10th or for NEET. Today there is homeschooling for a creche. A 2-year-old child today is having homeschooling. Right? The kid is just made to sit in front of the same laptop, starting from a low-end laptop all the way to the most latest MacBook, and all the kid is doing is fiddling with something and talking to somebody on the screen. So I think D2C for education is right now ready, and I think people are probably more keen to upskill themselves now than before. So definitely for an educational institution, a targeted D2C will be far better today in today's times than going through a B2C manner.
Beautiful. Sriram, you speak at conferences, at colleges. You also write for media and for your own blog. What are your sources of inspiration? What books do you read? What would you recommend for us?
So I envy you so much, Praveen. You said you have about 100 or hundreds of books behind you. You said you read 92 books last year and so on. Unfortunately, I don't read books as in books. So neither fiction nor fiction, nor non-fiction. But I read for about 2 hours every day, mostly on my iPad or on the go on the iPhone or on the very less on the desktop or the MacBook. But I read industry anecdotes, and whatever I'm talking to you is all of the acquired information that I have taken mostly from the internet and of course talking to people. So from the beginning, I think I've not probably had a very good habit in reading books like people like you. You said you have read 43 books this year. Hats off to you. So much of those. Frankly speaking. In fact, in the last 1.5 years, thanks to this OTT platforms, I've hardly seen maybe 4 or 5 Tamil films, right? Purely because of the duration, that 120, 150 minutes becomes too long, while most of the Western language films or even Korean films are sub 90 minutes, and it is quick. So maybe I'm probably moving away from my reading to watching as well, where it is short format. So no offense to those who read or those who don't read. I'm talking about my experiences. So my inspiration comes mostly from reading. mostly from journals and mostly from online websites, so to say, largely within the consumer space. But there are certain industries which are of interest to me, like, for example, electric vehicles, like, for example, aviation. Today I don't work, but when airports and metros open, I'm very sure we'll have a SpexMaker store in some of the airports, right? And I'm not joking. If you order your specs in the morning when you're flying out of Chennai, when you're coming back tomorrow or today, not maybe today or even tomorrow, the new pair of frames can actually be delivered at your house.
Wow.
We do it in Chennai, Bangalore, Madurai, Coimbatore, at least in the big cities that we operate. And I'm talking about this in a public forum, so it's not like an idea or something. Today we can do it, right? So you see a beautiful pair of reading glasses or reading spectacles, progressive single vision bifocal. You order in the morning at 5:30. When you go home in the night, it will be delivered. So I read about aviation. I read about the opportunities in aviation. Electric vehicle. We are using mostly petrol vehicles to deliver our finished goods from our laboratory to the 240 stores. Now I'm thinking, can we move to EV? Of course, it's all about climate change, but maybe some small contribution from our side, but it's also cutting our OPEX. So I read about EV. The book that I read or browse every day, there is one book which I read and browse, and it gives me a lot of inspiration, is my own life. At least the last 30 years, if I could say. So I try to take one page from that book of 30 years and I read that page. It's not physical, it's all out here. What I did in a particular industry or a particular company or a particular class when I was in school or in college, and how can I take inspiration from there? And the only inspiration for me is the mirror. Of course, there are so many people whom I look up to, but my only inspiration is my mirror. Can I be a better person in the next moment than I was in the previous one? So it's not even tomorrow. I don't know if I will wake up tomorrow, right? I mean, unfortunately, we just lost a very dear person whom we saw in the Thai group, right? Life is very uncertain. I don't know if I will wake up tomorrow morning. Now I'm talking to you. After I finish this session, can I be a better person than I was before I started the session? This is the only thing I think of every moment.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Sriram. We are all looking forward to the autobiography of a retailer. So some of the daily lessons that you're putting in has to come out in some format. And for the rest of you, My Retail Journey, go check it out. Tomorrow, there is a retail SIG where the roles are reversed, wherein Sriram is going to be the host and we have another guest. So sign up for the Thai retail SIG that's happening tomorrow. We also have follow-on of a creative SIG and a book review session later in the month. But Sriram, you are one of our own, so no major formality in thanking you, but it's always a pleasure to listen to you. Audience, you've been lovely, loads of questions. Feel free to reach out to Sriram S. on LinkedIn, Sriram Sanjeevi. Check it out, reach out. He is one of our own, so feel free to pick his brains. I know a lot of questions I was unable to answer, but thank you, Saurav. Fabel is ITC's flagship product in the luxury chocolate category. You want to know more? Register right away and see you all tomorrow at the Retail SIG. Thank you, Sriram, the Thai Secretariat, and all of you. Have a lovely evening, a safe week, and see you all tomorrow. Thank you, Sriram.
Thank you, Praveen. One small thing is the autobiography that you said. I am in the process of writing a book. In fact, the founder of Notion Press, we were talking a few weeks back, and he said you should write a book on D2C, incidentally. And he said you could probably add on a lot of value. So work in progress. My Retail Journey is my own blog site where I write. Autobiography, definitely a no, because in one of the interviews, Mr. K. Balachandar, when he was interviewing Superstar, he asked, when are you going to write your autobiography? So Talaivar said, if I write an autobiography, I have to say all the truth, which I cannot. I'll have to swallow some. And if I don't do that, I'll not be doing justice to my autobiography. Autobiography எழுதுற அளவுக்கு நான் மகாத்மா காந்தியும் இல்ல லீ அயக்கோகாவும் இல்ல so definitely no. So no autobiography. I cannot hide, I cannot say something which is untrue, but definitely I'll keep writing as long as I can. And please do drop by and check in. Wonderful interacting with you, Praveen. Although we are miles apart through the screen, the same liveliness, the same fun quotient, the same interviewing ability that you have as a host. Hats off to you. Thank you so much for inviting, and thank you everyone for joining on this session. The session is being recorded and it will also be posted on the TIE's official YouTube channel, maybe in a day or two. So if in case you want to rehearse or you want to share this with anyone, please feel free to do so. With that, thank you everyone. Nandri, Vanakkam. Have a safe evening. Bye-bye.